Welcome back to Santasa University's video training series. This is lesson 5, Deploy Modified App, how to deploy your modified workflow to production and process data. The objectives for this training include how to deploy your modified development workflow to production, how to preview the previous version in a snapshot, how to create and execute production jobs, how to use drop and replace option, how to preview the results in production. And again, this lesson assumes that you've done lessons 1 through 4, creating my first app, a low-code transform process, deploy my first app, and modify my first app lessons, as you're going to need that app and the results of that workflow, which is going to be referenced in this training. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to use this number 4, modify my first app, since this contains lessons 1 through 4 that were configured and are required for this particular lesson in lab. So from the home page, we're going to click on that app. And this could be your pre-configured app that you've done from your previous training lessons. And it should contain this loader process, 2 different transforms, and that lookup table that we talked about with the user lookups. Okay, so if we hover our mouse over the extreme left side menu, you'll see that there are 2 sections here. We've talked about this before. There's a development section, and then there's a production section. Right now, we're viewing the development workflow. This is where, again, you make your changes, add nodes, do any configuration changes without affecting that production workflow. And this is what we just accomplished in lesson 4, which was modifying that first app, creating this particular workflow. If we were to look over in the production workflow, we would notice that we don't have that additional node and the lookup table. We'll go back to the development workflow, and you'll see that we've got the lesson 4 information in here. So the next thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and start the deployment process, which we've done before, but we're going to, now that we've made this change and added this new node, we want to deploy this instance to production. So we will go up to the upper menu bar, click on the deploy button. And again, since this is not the first deployment, now you've got an additional section at the top here where you're going to see snapshot name provided. What happens is anytime you deploy a new change or a new version to production, the system is going to prompt you to take a snapshot of the current environment. So in the event you needed to roll back to your previous configuration, you've got a backup copy. So we're going to click in the snapshot name section here, and we can just call it whatever. I'm going to call it, lesson 4. And I'm just going to put my initials, and you could put your initials too, or whatever you'd like to do. This can be any name you want to give it, but you want to give it some kind of name. And you're going to see where there's going to be some changes made because we've got a new table to add here. And so we will click on the deploy button. And what's going to happen in the background is the system is going to spin up a cluster process and deploy that configuration into the new environment, into our production instance. And we can watch and see exactly what's happening in this section by clicking on the, in the left-hand side, the operations tab, and then you'll notice that there's a running deploy section listed. If we click on that, we can actually see the running instance happening right there and know that it is in a running state. Once it is deployed, you will get a green check mark, like similar to these ones that are listed here, where the deployment has been pushed and all the information has been processed and pushed to production, and then you're all set and ready to go. So now we'll take a look at the production workflow. And you'll notice that we do indeed have the new workflow. A couple of things to note here, that if we look in the state of the previous nodes that we had before, you'll notice that the data is still there because we haven't made a change to that production. We've just added this new section. So in essence, we don't need to process this data again because it's there and we have that information already available. So what we need to do then is just to process this final step, which again, if we hold the shift key and click, we will get that blue icon with a check mark letting us know that we've selected that icon. And we go to the top, create new, and this is prod, and we can call it whatever we want to call it. So training job, whatever you want to call it with your initials or whatever you want to give. And again, we're going to use that training runtime that we've used before. And because this is a new app or a new node, new table that's going to be created, we're going to use the drop and replace mode. And again, we can have any description we want here. We can have any tag that we want here. Maybe we want to call it training, whatever it is that is relevant to the job that you've created. Again, just a quick review. The node that you've selected is in the process name. The run type, again, is just Spark at this point. The runtime, again, that we've selected was that training runtime, and the process mode, again, drop and replace, since we're running this as the first instance of this. Then in the date range, remember there's a number of different selections that we can choose from. Custom is where we can select a date range of dates to process. End days gives us select a specific number of days to process. Last week, last month, quarter, year are all pretty much as described. So again, for our lesson, we're going to click on custom. In the from date, we're going to choose the June 2nd of 2016. And because we're doing this first deployment of this particular node in the app, we're just going to use that same date and just do that 1 day process. And we'll go ahead and save and execute. Again, you're going to notice that the job has successfully saved. And we will go ahead and open our activity monitor. Remember, we can monitor all the actions that are occurring. You can see our job has kicked off. Go ahead and expand that section. And again, we've noticed that we do have a cluster that's up and running right now, but if we didn't, again, this process would kick off the create cluster process, and that cluster process would take 8 to 10 minutes within AWS to spin up and create that cluster. Again, to reiterate, this is just, again, one of those cost-saving features of the Centasa platform where you don't have clusters up running all the time that are just sitting idle when you're not processing any jobs and costing you money. So that's, one of those cost-saving benefits. And again, we notice here, the second transform here is processing. We got the white node with the dashed lines around it, letting us know that the process is running. And again, we click and drag the node around. You remember, you can zoom in and out if you want to see the full workflow, or zoom in and make it where you want to see it. And we're going to sit here and wait for this process to run. And it'll take a few minutes because we are, again, running that lookup process. And once we get that process completed, you'll notice here that we've got a nice green check mark. Successful, of course, we would have gotten that red error, and we would have been able to look in the section over here on in the right in the activity to look at those logs if there was an error to decode. But again, we have processed and we're in good shape. So we'll close that activity section. And now we want to check that output table to make sure that we are processing the data and get some results in here. So we did process that one day, looking in that overview section for the state. And then in the preview section, yep, we see that we've got data listed there. And we're going to go ahead and scroll towards the end so we can make sure that we see all that other information from the lookup table that we've added, where we've got the user information and the key and the unique code, role, organization information is in there. So we are in good shape. The data is what we're looking for. So now we can actually process the whole thing. So there's a couple of ways we can do it. If you don't like the fact that these nodes are light green, may give you a false sense that it hasn't processed. Again, you can check that by just looking in the state file. You'll notice, yes, we do have all the data available. So now we can simply rerun this job that we just ran in a replace date range mode. And we're going to do that and choose the next day, which is June 3rd, and we're going to end on June 15th, just like in our state files for the other previous two nodes that we processed. Once we've set that up, we're still going to use that same training runtime, save and execute. We're going to see, yep, the job is saved, and we do have activity monitor telling us we do have this job running. Again, since we just ran this cluster, ran this job, that cluster is up and running and active. So this is going to give us an opportunity to let this data process in a much timely fashion. And again, we're going to sit and wait for that process to spin up. We're going to wait for the node to turn that white color. There it goes with the dashes around it. Again, this is our process running through our defined code. And we can take a look at that again, remember, where we have joined that lookup table into this data, all the mappings that we have done to add the lookup information to this node, making sure we had that example filter created where we were not including any days that had no time listed in the row as just an example. This was just an example filter to show you how that worked. And remember, our node is being added and written to this particular event store, as we've covered in the earlier lessons. So we'll go back over here, and again, we're waiting for this monitor to turn to the dark green, which will let us know that the processing is complete. And again, if there was something wrong with the data feed itself or any other error that would have occurred, this node would have turned red, and we again would have been able to click over here and do some troubleshooting within the activity node. Again, if you wanted to go into the notes section, this is a good time while you're waiting on a job to finish to add some notes. You can add a note here. This is a training. We'll call this training note, and you can add that, and that allows people to comment on that. You can add specific notes for each of the different transforms or loading nodes to give your production instance a really nice detailed understanding for anybody else who comes in, any of other analysts, data scientists, other users, to understand what the workflow does, how it processes the data, and any relevant information that you may want to add about the data. But we see that the node is turned green, job is done, so we'll go ahead and close that activity section. And again, we'll check out our overview section here on the table and check the state. And yes, we've processed all those days of data. Go back to the preview section. Yep, we've got all those additional rows of data now and all that additional information about our data that we were hoping for. So yes, we've got a successful process and we've successfully deployed Just a quick note again about the snapshot and the rollback, the triple dots in the upper right here. If you click on that, this is where you would be able to go and roll back if you needed to roll back. But that's just wanted to give you a FYI about where that was at. But we've completed our lesson for today. We've got a successful deployment to production and reprocessing of all the data. We will click on the arrow in the upper left to go back to our home page, and that concludes the lesson for today.